Welcome back to our channels, Warriors. We are still growing today. Another special interview, man. I found one. It's like a diamond in the rough these days. Having to find an old school prison guard, a former correctional officer, but I found one for you guys. It goes by the name of Dan. What's up, man? How's everything?
Good. How you doing, man?
Pretty good, dude. Thank you for reaching out, touching bases. I know you said you had seen a couple of my videos, and you said you could relate and you kind of know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely.
So, what year did you join the department?
So I went to the academy April of '93, and I went to the 6 week academy, and I landed at Corcoran June 1st of '93. Um, I was doing VR. I started on first watch. I'll never forget my first night. I got there a half hour early. It was 3C gym. They had the double bunks fully housed, and the dude just hands me the keys and walks out the door.
Sounds about right.
And luckily, I had a good gunner up in the gun, and he kind of ran everything because they don't go over that stuff at the academy with because each prison's different. They all got different setups. So I did VR for God a long time, and then right towards the end of my VR, I was on 4B a lot, which at the time they had just switched over from RTC, which is return to custody, and we just started housing level 4 mainline. And
So,
I was over there on VR when the RTC was getting shipped out. So, everybody sends you their best level 4 inmates.
facts. Facts.
So I ended up getting my number was like 1159 at that time. And I was offered a Tuesday, Wednesday, I believe, in 4B1 right. One left they used to call Bedrock back in the day. So it was normal. Let the inmates out, bring them in, stabbings on the yard type of stuff. And I think the biggest thing that happened was it wasn't on our yard, it was on 4A, but that was still shoe over there. That's that Preston Tate got shot. And that big investigation, because they had a lot of shootings at Corcoran. And the violence at Corcoran was 5 times what any other institution was at that time, and it was pandemonium sometimes, man. It was crazy, the yards, how everything. Um, I remember being out there and the whole yard went off. 3 shots fired. Yard gunner, I called it a 2-for. He got 2-for-1, but they were bringing ambulances in, and these guys were trying to put like a Southerner with a black into this. I was like, whoa, whoa, what are you doing? I was brand new too. I was green. Most of those guys on the yard had, most of those guys at Corker showed up 88, 89. Now you had some OGs that, from 84, 85 that transferred in, but the majority of people at Corcoran started in 88, 89. So, all those guys had a couple hash marks when I had a blank sleeve. So we had to wear the green pants, the brown shirt, because we weren't shoe. And at the time, if you worked, so they had 2 watch offices at Corcoran. So you had a level 3 watch office and a level 4 watch. If you worked level 3, you couldn't work overtime on level 4 and vice versa. Um,
Why
Later
is
on,
that?
I don't know. That's when I got there. That's how they were doing it. They consolidated later on because, when it first opened, both sides were shoe. And that's probably why they had it like that. Because, you had jumpsuits on one side. Obviously, the only guys wearing jumpsuits on the other side was the kitchen or ISU and IGI and the ad segs. And
Yeah.
at that time, A yard had the ad seg. There was A yard, B yard, C yard, and then we had that was level 3, and then level 4 was 4A and 4B. And 4B was known as the Sharks back then, and you know after right after the Tate incident, I don't know if you ever heard about this. This is kind of crazy, but Um, an officer on 4A took logbooks and met with the FBI. And the SSU, this was like April 2nd, I believe, 94. And they had a chase. The SSU was chasing this guy, and the FBI had him. They actually they were doing like 90 miles an hour in this chase. And the FBI, they got to FBI headquarters there, and SSU went in and demanded, to have that dude and the evidence, because it was Corcoran's logbooks, and they told him to kick rocks or they were going to arrest them. So it ended there, but that was kind of a crazy thing at that time because everybody was talking about it. Um, then shortly after that, there was I don't know if you ever heard of the Corcoran Five, the
Not
booty
Corcoran
bandit.
Five. No.
So then they had the booty bandit case. And like I said, this was all on 4A. I was on 4B at the time. And that was kind of interesting, And, guys get drawn into this stuff because they sign, sergeants sign a slip for two guys to be put together, right?
Right.
And, then they were trying to say it was retaliation because they knew this guy was a booty bandit, and supposedly this guy raped this guy. So they won in court. It went to court and went to a jury.
Who won in
the
court?
jury, huh?
Who won in court?
It was, I think it was 4 officers and 1 sergeant,
Okay.
if I remember right. Then June 21st, 1995 was the Corcoran bus incident on our yard. And that, I think 8 guys lost their jobs. Now, 5 of them got them back pretty quick. One of the, so back up a little bit. We had 1 captain at Corcoran at that time. 1 captain. Each yard had a program administrator. So it's a little different than how it is now because you got captains all over a joint. So the captain was the man. I mean, he was in charge of the whole institution, I mean, the program administrators ran the yard, but the captain had the juice, and he was in the watch office, actually on the level 3 side. Super good dude. But so we had the bus incident, and the AW. I think he was AW. He ended up losing his job. He got it back later on. I think everybody got their jobs back except for the program administrator, but he decided to take early retirement.
Damn.
But that was a crazy thing. And you anybody that's out there can look it up and read about it. There's obviously all the allegations and what went down. It was pandemonium. That's all I could tell you. It was pretty crazy. And I had just celebrated my 2nd year in the department, and you see a lot of stuff, man. I wasn't expecting some of the stuff I saw as far as stabbings, searching cells, finding weapons. So when they started transitioning to SHU, they transitioned to SHU. So we started, sending those guys out and bringing in SHU inmates. And I think I can't remember if I bid or if I got put up there, but I think I bid up there on a yard gun position. And at the time, the department, I think Gomez was the director, but so they started integrating all these guys, right?
Yeah.
So you had to really be careful on how you put these guys on the tier because you knew they were going to go out to yard, and you didn't want to have like black, 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 and then Southerner, because you let out the yard, you got black, black, black. So you got 6 guys out the yard if they're double celled. And then you let these 2 Southerners out there because every time they went to yard, it was on. I don't even think these guys knew why they were fighting. But it wasn't anything we could do about it. That was the directive that came down, and they tried to say gladiator wars at Corcoran. Well, this was coming down from the upper management,
Right.
to reintegrate everybody. So I'm not kidding you. At first, so we'd have an incident. I'd shoot the block gun. They'd get down. We'd bring everybody in, right? Now the reports were a joke. It was generic. Inmate, blank and inmate blank were engaged in mutual combat, striking each other with clenched fists as the head and upper torso, right? I was like, what's
Right.
a clenched fist? A fist is a fist, right? It's
Yeah.
it's kind of like the CDC and CDCR. Well, if you look up rehabilitation, it means to correct. So we already have corrections of,
Yeah. Yeah.
California Department of Corrections. So they just made some redundant. Some guy probably got paid $100,000 to come up with that new slogan. But
Facts.
anyway, I don't. I didn't wear those patches until they made me. I always kept my old CDC patches on.
I hear you.
So eventually, we'd lock up the yard, bring them in. That was it for the day. Send in your little generic report. Sergeant would come over, review the video. Um, then we started running, like if it happened on the yard, we'd bring them in, and then we'd send more people out because guys weren't getting their yard, and they're supposed to get their yard.
Right.
There was times where I shot 3, 4 times in the same day.
Damn.
So it was and most of the stuff was, you know, fisticuffs.
Yeah.
Once in a while there was a weapon out there. Um, we still had the H&K 9mm at that time. Then we had the single 37mm launcher.
Yeah.
Inside we had what I hate to tell you this, but we called them donkey dicks. So it didn't have multiple baton rubber. It was one big long, and the thing didn't do anything. So you shot rubber inside, wood outside. They eventually got the multiple baton rounds for the rubber inside, but you'd shoot that thing and it'd go. Woo, 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 woo. You could actually
Wow.
see it going in the air. It was super slow. It wasn't very effective. Um, I don't know why they had wood outside and rubber inside, but that's just the way it was. Um, so I did that for till I can't remember if it was 98 or 99. I got asked, they were doing a bunch of validations, IGI, and they needed a couple people, and I got a phone call. And I said, yeah, I'll come over there and do it. So that's where I got involved with IGI and the validation process. And, a lot of these guys, they already had all the paperwork. They just didn't have the manpower to validate these guys. So we were validating, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 a day, putting the packages together and sending them wherever they sent them. And then it's funny let me go step back a little bit. I don't know if you ever heard about Delgado. They called him Toro.
No.
So this dude came in on 3 strikes, and he vowed to kill 3 people for every strike they gave him. And he came in on some like petty burglary or something. So I remember being up in my yard gun, and I heard the alarm, and so he killed his cellie. And the thing that's kind of ironic was his cellie was Joker Mendoza. I don't know if you know Joker Mendoza.
Sounds
Okay,
familiar.
so Joker Mendoza was involved in the killing of Rodolfo Cheyenne Cadena down at Palm Hall.
Yeah.
I think that was 70. So you're talking 70 sometime. He went down there, tried to do a peace thing,
Yeah.
and they stabbed him like 50 times, threw him off the tier, and then when he hit the concrete, they stabbed him. He was. Anyway, so this guy was involved in that killing. He was really kind of an ass. I remember feeding him a bunch when I'd work overtime, in that building. I can't remember what building he was in, but Delgado was pretty crazy. So I was working at overtime over in One Right, and they brought this dude to committee, right? Now, he had already killed someone in his cell, and he was on walk alone. And I remember the girl was just like, the CC1 was like, no, we can't let him go to yard with everybody.
Yeah.
So the committee cleared this dude. First day he went to yard with this dude, he killed this guy. And I mean, he bludgeoned and beat the crap out of this guy. I mean, put a big smiley face in blood.
Wow.
And the big thing was, is like, where was the gunner, And the gunner was like, I think it was a kid. He was pretty new. And I don't know what happened with all that, but it was a bad, bad crime scene. I remember that. But later on, I'll go through some stuff with Delgado that I did with SSU, and I kind of got stuck with this guy, man. And
Really?
yeah, I don't know, for some reason, anytime he had to go somewhere when I was on the squad, I got stuck going with this guy.
Man.
So did all that stuff with IGI, mainly did validations, went out on crime scenes sometimes if ISU needed help, kind of got my feet wet. And so I'll tell you about the political stuff. So I'm not going to name any names, but I put in for, the ISU position, right?
Yeah.
This Asian guy got it. Super nice guy. And I was talking to someone, and they're like, yeah, they gave it to him because he spoke 3 languages. I'm like, yeah, who speaks any of those languages in the prison? There was no inmates, I don't think, at the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, whatever. So another guy left. So I put in again, and this other guy got the job. And they had a little volleyball hookup. So
Yeah.
it was the homie hookup thing. I finally got in there after interviewing numerous times, and I never forget. The lieutenant was a really good dude. He's still a good friend, and he came to me one day. He goes, "Hey, I need your help," and I go, "You need my help? What
Yeah.
about the other guys you hired?" He
Right.
started laughing. He goes, "No, really, I need your help." So I was like, "All right, I'll help you, man. What do you need?" And I can't remember what he asked me, but to that day, when I see him, I always tell him, "You still need my help?"
Yeah.
But so when I got in ISU, that was a big eye opener. A lot of doors opened.
Yeah.
You were on call. I remember I did a lot of death in custodies, man. I'd always get called in. For some reason, I was Dr. Death, a lot of homicides, just natural deaths. So I got called in one time. It was a death in custody. They had the guy down in Bakersfield.
Yeah.
So I drive down to Bakersfield, and this is kind of funny, and you might relate to this, but um, when you count tears,
Yeah.
what do you count?
Bodies.
Yeah. Living, breathing flesh, right?
Yep.
I get a call from the watch commander, and he's like, "Hey, Pete, I need your count." Like, what are you talking about? The dude's dead. No, you got to do a count. And I'm like, no, I'm not counting this guy. He's dead.
Right.
I go, boss, we count living, breathing flesh. Oh, he blew up on me, man. I was like, well, I ain't counting him. Sorry. And he was hot. So I called my boss. I said, look, you want to send these guys, to the beach when they miss a guy that's in the cell dead. You want them counting live, breathing, why would I count a dead guy?
Right.
It never went anywhere, but that dude, man, he wanted my butt. He wanted to write me up and for insubordination. But I mean, I did what I thought was right,
Right.
and I rolled with the punches. But um, I got into doing a lot of search warrants and a lot of investigations, listening to the inmate phones. And for a lot of people out there, this was kind of before the cell phones got real big in the prison system. So most of anything that was going on in the prison had to go over the phones, and these guys like to talk code. So you really had to be up on listening for stuff that was out of the ordinary. And I mean, I wish I had some of the recordings. I used to have a bunch of recordings, but I didn't really keep a lot of stuff,
Yeah.
I got some pictures and some other stuff, but I I was pretty good at figuring this stuff out, and started doing search warrants. People come into visiting, we'd bust them, and we had a pretty good track record. We had a good team there. Um, so we were started to piggyback. They started letting us go outside the institution, you know,
Yeah.
and that was kind of cool. We'd go out and so like whoever brought it in, we'd go hit their house. Obviously we took I don't know why they didn't let CERT go. I think it was all, liability stuff because our CERT team was great. They had a great guys, man. They were super sharp. They all were excellent. But we'd always have to get like the local sheriff or the local PD. And I never could understand it, but I think it was like a liability thing. They were scared to let them go out there with all their guns. I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, but it would have been cool if we could have, because we're all one team. But then again, you might piss people off. You're in their back door. Um, so like if we did something in LA, we'd call either LA County Sheriff or LAPD, and we'd meet them at the wherever their precinct was and go over everything. And they'd have a meeting with all the guys, and then sometimes these guys would have these fancy rigs, and they'd be standing on the railings with all their guns hanging off, driving to wherever we were going, and we're following them.
Yeah.
And they would do the entries, clear the house, and then we would go in and do the search. And I'd say 9 times out of 10, we'd find more dope, money, just different types of indicia that to help the case, and take stuff off the streets. So
Yeah.
I remember I did one this northern structure. Well, there was two of them on 4A. They slashed a cop through the food port,
Damn.
and by the time I got the phone call where I got paged and got to the institution, they had already shipped these guys out to Tehachapi.
Yeah.
They were worried about retaliation type thing. So they x-rayed them before they left, and they both had something up inside them, right? So I called my boss and I said, hey, I'm going to go get a search warrant to go get them. And he's like, you can't do that, man. You can't do a search warrant to go up some. I said, oh, yeah, I'm going to get one. He told me, he goes, I'll buy you dinner if you get one. I said, all right. So the judge, he was out by I-5 at Harris Ranch doing a wedding.
Yeah.
So I typed up this search warrant, explaining that we were going to take him to the hospital, give him a laxative of some kind, and, wait for him. So Tehachapi took these two guys and isolated them. They put a jumpsuit forward and a jumpsuit backward on these guys. So, it took a while. I had to drive from Corcoran all the way out to Harris Ranch, get back. We had a team. I think there was 4 of us. We had 2 cars. Get up to it's snowing in Tehachapi. So we get there, and one of the guys was able to rip open his jumpsuit and eat the kites.
Man.
The other guy, we took him, and I just told him, I said, hey, look, man, you can give this stuff up the easy way, or we can do it the hard way.
Right.
And you know how Norteños are. So we did it the hard way. And I can't remember what they gave him, like go lightly or something like that. Anyway, took a little bit, and pretty soon he was flowing like we had a 5-gallon bucket.
Damn.
So this guy had a hit. He had a good list for Norteños, a bad list for Norteños. He had Mexican mafia guys' names and numbers. I can't remember. He had all the rules and reglas,
Yeah.
all that. I mean, it was really detailed. I mean,
Right.
there was like, I can't remember how many names it was, but it was like the biggest one they'd ever seen. It was pretty cool. I remember I went to one. I never really went to a lot of the IGI stuff, but I went to the IGI meeting, where they meet. I remember if it was once a month or however often they meet, but I went to that one because I wrote like it was probably like with all the names on there, it was probably like 45 or 50 page confidential.
Yeah.
And did everybody want? I said, you guys need to talk to the whoever. I'm not making copies for everybody. And you talk to the IGI lieutenant. he'll take care of it for you. So that was kind of cool. That was something new because we had never did a search warrant to like that, and that's the way a lot of the inmates walk around with stuff. They key strip.
Yeah.
So that kind of set a foundation. And if someone did it before then, I didn't know about it. And that wasn't a glory thing. It was just another avenue now we had, to get the judge signed. And I don't know if you ever knew anything about search warrants, but you got what they call a hero sheet.
Yeah.
And it's like I did this, I did that, what your rate of success is and all that stuff. I was never really a glory hog, but you had to fill this thing out. And I can't remember where it was at when I left, but it was, I did I did over 150 search warrants,
Damn.
and there was a lot of guys in the unit that were doing them too,
Yeah.
and I don't know if you want to talk about, so the main guys we had at Corcoran, you got Artie Guzman, um, the Grajeda brothers were there.
Yeah.
So like Rene Boxer Enriquez was there for a minute.
Was he?
Yeah. Roland Berry,
Mm.
uh, Weddle Shryrock.
Damn.
Of course, Peg Leg Morgan was there, and when I wasn't on the squad, but I did see him at the hospital. I think he showed up in 93 or 94. And then, because he was sick, he was dying. And
Yeah.
then Topo Peters was there right after him.
Wow.
They might even been there together. I don't remember, but he passed away at the hospital at Corcoran too. So you had, those guys were the two most influential guys. And I know, Raymond Shyrock was pretty
Yeah.
influential guy too. But and Boxer, of course, he later, became famous when he
Yeah.
left. And then like when Artie left, it was a big shocker. Well, when Wendell Norris left, I was still running a shoe yard as a gunner, and I had one section at SNYs, and he ended up coming into my section, and God, the dude was a beast. And it was just weird. You hear all the stories. I'd never met the guy before, but we had a bunch of NLRs, bunch of, I don't know if we had any NFs, but we had a bunch of Northern Structure. Um, I don't remember if there was any MA guys. Um, there probably was, but there wasn't nobody like notorious, well known in there. So that was kind of interesting. They had for these guys that. What's crazy is, so early on, the criteria for them to go SNY or protective custody was the same criteria that it took to validate. You had to have 3 independent sources.
Yeah.
So a guy said when you were a lieutenant, a guy came up and said, "Hey, I got to get off the yard. I know these guys are going to stab me."
Right.
Okay, that's one. Kick rocks. We need 2 more. That was what the book said.
Right.
Later on it was they showed up and I can't be on the line. There they go, SNY.
Yeah.
But there was we had Mark Glass was probably the main Aryan Brotherhood guy, and a guy named Thomas Clark, pirate. But yeah, we had this guy named Wolf. I can't remember his name. He ended up passing away. But I remember this dude. He was up and coming with he probably was already AB, but he wasn't validated at the time. But he when this was an ADSEG, he walked up to the wrong cell and the guy opened the door and he went in. This guy, the guy that he hit with the razor, I mean, this guy had like 222 staples and I can't remember how many stitches. He survived, and he was supposed to go home in like 5 days.
Wow.
And this guy Wolf, I can't remember. I can't remember his real name, but anyway, him and a guy named Steve Vlasic were um, up and comers. Wolf was on 4A, and Blastwich was on 4B. And later on, Gary Luttrell came in. I don't know if you're familiar with Gary Luttrell. He was
No.
an AB. Because Glass, which Buzzard, they called him Buzzard, and Pirate, which was Thomas Clark, they ended up getting indicted with that big RICO thing
Yeah.
when they took Teddy Bingham and all those guys from Pelican Bay and shipped them out. So we had lost the main Aryan Brotherhood guys there that were validated. I think Pat Brady came in later on. I don't know if you ever heard his name.
Yeah, definitely.
So now I did a special transport one time with. So we had. I don't know if you know Marvin Chunky Stanton
No.
or Ricky Turflinger. So
No.
they were both at Pelican Bay, and then they brought a guy named Bird down.
Okay.
I don't remember if those guys flew in and we picked them up at the airport or if they transported them all the way down. Sometimes they flew those guys in, and we, as soon as the airplane hit the runway, we'd be in the cars right behind it. You know, it's kind of, I mean, I don't want to say it was hilarious, but you're chasing the airplane and it stops and they get the guy out and right into the car and off we go. You know, like,
Yeah.
I guess they're worried about, a hit or somebody trying to get these guys to do an escape or something. So, but we took those guys up to the federal court. It was kind of cool. They actually, on 99, they actually stopped traffic when we got up close to the turnoff to get off, because we'd run cars pretty close together, and we had a helicopter above us. We had CHP leading the way, and then Fresno PD on their motorcycles stopping all the intersections,
Yeah.
so we could get a straight shot to the courthouse. It was kind of above my pay grade. I was in the passenger seat helping out with but we took those guys down into the where they had them, and we had them in those. I don't even remember the black boxes
Yeah.
where they flip them like this, and I couldn't believe those guys could eat their sandwiches and stuff,
Right.
because we were told do not uncup them, and I mean they're inside a barred
Yeah.
cell, but super respectful, articulate. Matter of fact, I remember Chunky, he spoke fluent Spanish.
Really.
And I asked him, I said, "Where'd you learn your Spanish, man?" He goes, "Oh, I'm watching the television up at the Bay." He literally learned fluent Spanish watching TV.
Wow.
Um, then we had 4A4 right was the PHU C section.
How was that?
I don't know. So, like, we had Juan Corona. You familiar with him? He was the migrant farm worker that killed like 25 guys.
No.
Yeah, he was in there. Of course, Manson was in there.
Really.
Sirhan, Dana Ewell. He was in there for a triple murder. I think he killed his parents and someone else. That Mikhail Markovich, he was the one that killed the Cosby kid.
Really.
Off the highway down in L.A. There was a Cameron Hooker. The garbage bag killer was there. There was some sergeants. So I think when did you talk to Rudy not too long ago?
Yeah.
So a lot of those guys he talked about, those sheriffs and stuff, they ended up, when PHU went from Quentin down to Corcoran, those guys all followed. So there was, I think there was CHP. I think there was Los Angeles County Sheriff. I worked overtime over there once in a while up in the control booth. It was kind of an interesting building. I mean,
Really.
yeah, it was weird having those guys walk around because those guys were program clerks. Like Michael Thompson was there. He's doing a lot of podcasts now,
Yeah.
getting interviewed. He was 45 years in the prison system.
Wow.
talked to him when he was a program clerk. I remember, I don't know all the details of it, but I know a 4A lieutenant got walked off for overfamiliarization with him, and she was the one that used to teach the IST class on overfamiliarization.
Sounds about right.
But that I don't remember the year that was. It was anyway. Those guys, bunch of those guys had yard jobs. When the food truck would come on the yard, PHU guys had pushed the carts. It was interesting at that time, some of the stuff that went on. I remember one time they popped the door on accident. There was a side door on the shoe, and somehow it got open, and a bunch of Southern Hispanics attacked Manson with his guitar, smashed the guitar over his head. They didn't hurt him real bad, but his guitar was totaled. Yeah, so there's so much stuff that went on. It's just it's a lot of that stuff's 25, 30 years ago now, because my official retirement date was August of 2016. I went out on a medical, so I actually retired before 50. But and that's one of those things too. I got told. I went in. I was having issues. I'd run into an alarm,
Yeah.
and my legs would get heavy, and I'd fall sometimes and crash and burn. Get back up, grab my radio, and look like Gumby. And I couldn't figure it out, so I finally went to the doctor. And then he told me, "Yeah, you can't work no more, man. You got incurable condition." I'm like, "What is that?" All my veins were varicosed in my legs, right? So I did the workers' comp thing, and I thought about just trying to hide out in the control booth, but they were like, "No, you can't work anymore." And I'm like, "All right, whatever." So I stayed out, right? Then I filed for medical retirement, denied. Those two hands don't talk to each other.
Damn.
So I had to get an attorney. The same doctor that originally saw me, I went to him. Cost me $5,000 to have him do a report that when it was workers' comp didn't cost anything.
Yeah.
So anyway, I spent like 15, 16 grand. I go to this hearing, and I'd already moved out of state because I was going to retire either way. And I'd wait for my money if I had to.
Right.
Just leave early, So I ended up going to this hearing, and they brought this doctor that I went and saw, and I remember seeing this guy, and he looked at him. He didn't really do anything. And he goes, "All right, enjoy your retirement." Okay. Well, then he denied it, So that's what all this stuff. So they asked this guy. It was really funny. I was stressed out at the time. "Hey, did you remember seeing Mr. Officer?" I don't remember if they said Mr. Peters or Officer Peters, whatever it was. And he's like, "Oh yeah, I got the report here." He goes, "Based on your recommendation, could he go back to work?" "Oh, absolutely." So then the state attorney goes, "Well, did you get a chance to read Dr. Baum's report?" And he's like, "Yes, I did." He goes, "Based on that report?" He goes, "Oh, absolutely not." And the whole room just went silent. And you got a retired judge that's overseeing this.
Right.
My attorney, their attorney, and I mean, it was just dead. Dude, I was shaking. I was like, "Holy smokes, I can't believe this guy." Anyway, the attorney, I don't want to call him the prosecuting attorney, but the attorney for the state, he was a straight shooter. He was a good guy. Obviously, he was just doing his job. So he came out there, and he goes, "Man, if I'd have known now what I know now," he goes, "you wouldn't even be doing any of this." He goes, "Give me 3 weeks, we'll get your back pay." And so anyway, that was kind of my end of corrections. And I guess my story behind that is you got to fight for what you think's right. And I think it's because there's so many people that are trying to manipulate the system.
Right.
My legs used to swell up really bad. I was fortunate enough. I took my dad's 90 now. I took him up to see this vascular surgeon. And when I was there, I said, "Hey, you guys do workers' comp cases?" He goes, "Yeah." I go, "Would you take a look at my stuff?" And he goes, "Yeah, absolutely." So he couldn't do anything for my dad because my dad's his legs were just because of old age. But So I went and saw this guy. The I was really surprised they didn't give me any flack with workers' comp. They sent all the paperwork up there. And anyway, I ended up having both my great saphenous veins burned out by this guy with lasers, and man, it really helped. I wish I'd have known. I probably could have stayed on and finished. I don't know, but it sure helped. I don't know if when I moved out of state, the colder weather here
Yeah.
helped. Like I told you today when I went outside, it's snowing right now. So,
That's a trip, man.
so you got any questions for me, man?
Yeah, going back to Corcoran, like, what's a memory or incident that stands out to you the most?
Oh, um, there was a couple. One was on the yard, and I remember we were talking about it. I was with one of my buddies, and this dude was a big old corn-fed guy, man, just super nice guy. Um, and we had our backs up against the wall in between the two buildings. It was actually one right and two left. And there's big concrete wall there. And we were looking at we had a big wooden yard gun they put up. So this was probably somewhere between 95, 96, somewhere in there. And things just didn't look right on the yard, That's why we were over. We usually used to walk through the yard. They still had the weight pile, and people weren't on the weight pile. And you know how your spider sense is tingling? You
Yeah.
get that. We knew something was up. And we stripped everybody that was coming out of the buildings. They'd come out. Most of them come out with their clothes. I think at that time, I can't remember. They'd come out and pat them down. But when it erupted, I had never seen nothing like this, man. There was probably 400 or 500 guys on this yard, and there was weapons everywhere. I mean, these guys were getting stabbed, and when they started running, it sounded like when I'm up here where I'm at with the elk run, like a herd of buffalo.
Yeah.
There was that many guys running at each other. That one stands out because that's the one the yard gunner did a great job. I think he shot 2 times and he hit 3 guys. He got a twofer, and I believe one of the control booths shot. Because I remember he shot 3 times from the air. Because I remember his first shot was a warning shot, and it hit the building, the concrete of the building over where we were at. I don't know, probably like 50 yards from us. But I was like, oh my God. And we used to run into that stuff,
Yeah.
but we weren't running into that. That was the one time I could say where there wasn't one cop ran in there, till they were down. And I think there was like 5 or 6 shots fired. I don't remember for sure, but it took forever to clean it up. Third watch ended up finished cleaning all that stuff up. And it was kind of confusing. Back then we had all them generic reports.
Right.
And it was pretty hard to write a generic report on something where you're watching, 400 guys. Now, I'm not saying every guy was involved, but you couldn't even ID who was stabbing who.
Right.
Because, after they run, that was pretty crazy. I came in on one. They had they called it the Valentine's Day Massacre or something. They had it was on, I think it was on Valentine's Day, but it was in the dining hall. And, I went in there, I got a cart. We had a cart with all the markers, to mark all the evidence. Dude, I walked in that dining hall and I'd never seen so many trays and food, and it was just a mess, and they still had some of the inmates in there. They had cleared some out, a couple that got stabbed. But I can't remember if it was a Southern issue against each other. Like there was 2 factions on that yard. There was the Tehachapi faction and then the Corcoran faction. And I don't want to speak out of turn, but I want to say it was some internal thing, and one side got caught with their pants down, man, and
Yeah.
they got him pretty good. It was. I wish I could remember the variables, but God, it was such a long time ago. And that had to have been. It was in the 2000s, early 2000s. Um, but that one stood out just because of. But I'm gonna say the worst one I ever went to, and I remember I was at the house and I got called. Well, we had pagers. I got paged, and I called my boss, and he goes, "Hey, we got a staff assault in visiting."
Wow.
So I got there and walked in. My buddy's already putting markers down, and
Yeah.
but so there was blood going in, but once we got into the visiting room, so
Yeah.
all the visitors had left, right? This guy attacked this officer. I mean, it was crazy. His belt was laying there.
Wow.
The guy took the baton, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, literally this kid, and I don't know if he ever came back to work, man. Obviously, he was already gone when I got there because it took me like 45 minutes to get to work, but there was just blood everywhere, and his San Brown was sitting there. There was keys over here. There was chits way across. I mean, it was a violent attack. And I remember, I went in and looked at everything real quick. And I remember going outside and they had this dude inside a car. They were going to transport him. And I said, no, 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 no.
Yeah.
Do not take that. Oh, we got to get him. I said, no, we need pictures of him. They didn't remove any evidence off this guy, right?
Wow.
So I'm literally yelling at the watch commander. And I can't remember if the AOD had showed up yet, but I was putting myself out there, man, because I was.
Yeah.
But so I work for I work for my sergeant, the captain, our captain at the time, and the warden. That was the three people. I didn't work for the watch commander.
Right.
Not that I would disrespect the guy.
Right.
Like if I had something going on on a yard, I'd always go let the lieutenant know, hey, I can't let you know really where I'm going, what I'm doing, but I'll be in this building. And most of them respected that. They didn't really want to know.
Right.
So just because, I mean, depending on who the lieutenant was, I mean, it might give him a little bit more than that. But it was some of that stuff you just had to go do what you had to do. And I kind of felt bad sometimes. But anyway, I don't want to get off subject. But this guy, so they let me pull him out. Well, he still had the bloody shoes. And I ended up I got in trouble. Well, I don't know if I got in trouble, but yeah, I did. I got wrote up for cutting the tile off the visiting floor because it had a perfect imprint of the blood from his shoe. And it was probably overkill because obviously we know this guy did it. But when you go to court, forensic evidence is a big deal. It was I took those shoes off of him. That shoe print matched that tile print.
Right.
Did we really need that? I don't know.
Doesn't hurt.
But it's better to be thorough.
Right.
But that was because it was a staff member involved, and he almost killed that dude. I mean, that kid was in the hospital for quite a while. And I remember talking to him. I can't remember his name, and I probably wouldn't even say anything, but I don't know if he ever came back. I mean, it was horrible. That was probably one of the worst incidents because it was staff involved. And I went to a lot of staff assaults and process crime scenes, and I'm gonna tell you one other one. I had one of my good friends get killed at a bar, outside a bar, right? And I can't remember the year, but it had to have been before I got on the squad. So it was sometime in the earlier 90s, mid 95, 96, 97, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And, I followed it. I remembered the guy's name, and I don't remember it now, but so one day I go into work and I'm walking the tier and I look and I see this guy and I'm like, I think we were feeding. And there's the motherfucker that killed my best friend.
Damn.
So I was like, I wanted to kill the dude.
Right.
I really wanted to open the cell and kill this dude. So
Right.
I went up and saw the lieutenant, and I said, "Hey, we got to go up and talk to the warden, man." I said, and he was really cool. The warden at the time was really cool. It was George Smith, and I went up there and I said, "Man, boss, this dude's got to go." And you know, they shipped that dude out that night, special transport. You know,
Nice.
but what's the odds of that, man? You
So
know,
random.
I was like I was like shocked. But that was the first thing went through my head, you know, was like scandalous stuff because that was my best friend, you know.
Yeah.
And I probably wouldn't have did anything, but that was my thought process, you know. So, but that was another one that was kind of freaky.
Dang.
But I had seen guys in there too that I knew from the street, you know, as a kid
Really?
and just played it off, you know. I didn't have a problem. I ended up moving the guy because of that, but he stayed on the yard. But I didn't really have a problem with it. It was more to cover my butt, you know, CYA
Yeah.
type thing. But I think it was a guy I went to school with. Is what it was, you know.
Man, so you dudes you ran into, dudes that you knew. What about weapons when you were in there? What kind of weapons did you come across? Inmate manufactured weapons.
Oh man, bunch of stuff. Biggest one I ever got off a guy was, you remember those chairs with the rolling wheels,
Yeah.
and they had metal. They had metal. I think they were like 5 pieces coming out.
Yep.
This dude made a weapon. It was like 15 inches long.
Yeah.
You know, like I got this one that I could show you, but
Yeah. Damn.
so
I
this
love.
one's even got the hand grooves on it.
I seen
You
that.
know, um, and I used to do a lot of stuff at schools, and I had a board that I made from, you know, just this. This was found inside of a windowsill, that rubber over on the main line.
Yeah.
We went over and did a search, and I don't remember the year, but it was on a sea yard, and we found like 27 weapons down inside. So the back little glass window that they can look out,
Yeah.
that's we found like 23 or 27 weapons in a bunch of different cells. And once we found one, so I think I had like a metal rod I could stick in there and you'd feel it and then you'd pop it up. So then I can't remember who found the first one, but we called on the radio, and I don't remember if we got a heads up or if we were just being nosy. Um, but we got a bunch off the yard that time. That was at Corcoran.
Wow.
Um, when I was at Kern Valley, one of the lieutenants asked me if I'd come over and do some cell search. We had like a whole academy come in, and they had just opened this yard up. And of course, everybody sends their best level 4 inmates when you're opening a new yard. So, you know, but so here's all these guys, green as can be, and all the inmates on this yard had B, C, D number. I mean, guys that have been around for 30, 40, you know.
Right.
So they wanted, you know, me to go over, and another one of the ISU guys, they asked my boss if we could stay and help them out because I think it was third watch.
Yeah.
So we went over there, and the inmates used to tell me I was always too nosy. I was doing too much. So I was under these bunks, you know, tapping, and a tink, 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 clunk. So these guys, I remember calling the lieutenant. I said, "Hey, we got an issue, John." And he's like, "What's that?" I said, "First cell I went in, white guys. It's always the white guys for some reason."
Yeah.
So they scored the bunk, and you could see I'm talking weapons like, you know, 8 to 12 inches long, and they put cardboard up in there, and then made toothpaste, you know, toothpaste and water, um, and then they sanded it. And a lot of those guys worked like paint shop and that. They had the paint and repainted the bunk,
Right.
and you couldn't tell. You know, it was just like doing a car body. It was perfectly smooth. I mean, unreal.
Man.
So then we started searching. We pulled everybody out of the building, started checking bunks. I think we found like 10 or 15 bunks like that just in the one building. And so it ended up just being some training
Yeah.
because these guys from the academy, it was crazy. They would take the guy's clothing inside. Remember the cubicles? You had the one cubicle above and one below.
Yeah. Yeah.
They open up the shirt and they would actually refold it and put it on. And I'm like, no, you guys don't. I mean, I said, don't disrespect them, but I said, you ain't got to fold their stuff back. I mean, you can leave it on the bed or you can put it back in the cubicle, but you don't got to fold their clothes for them. I mean, come on. But that's the kind of stuff they were teaching these guys. I don't know if they were teaching them that at the academy but more than one of them was doing that. And I was like, my God, this is crazy. You didn't want to disrespect guys, but on the same token, let's not fold their clothes for them.
Right.
you know. I remember early on, Pruno, it wasn't a big deal. I mean, if you had a guy acting up, I don't know, Rudy spoke on it too. Some guys would dump it on their beds. Other guys would just dump it out and flush it down the toilet and leave it be. They wouldn't even write them up. So that kind of, I don't remember if it was 2001. We started having all these incel homicides, and they were all related to these guys drinking Pruno. I remember this guy's name was Gomez, and he killed his cellie. And they were so drunk when I went in, I got called in to talk to him, and I went down there, and I had already went and took pictures of his cellie, and his face was just beet red. And I'll never forget it. He was in the holding cage, and I told him I gave him his Miranda warning, and I don't even know why I'm here. I said, "Dude, you don't even know why you're here?" He goes, "Nah, man." I said, "Me," and he told me, he goes, "Yeah, me and Gallagher were drinking, we're having a good time, and we started fighting, but it was all good, man." And I said, "Look, bro," I said, "You killed him?" No,
Wow.
no. It didn't hit home till I showed him the picture, and the dude started just bawling and crying, and it was his best friend. But
What?
yeah, so he killed his best friend. They were cellies for a long time, and all over Pruno, you know.
Yes.
But we had like 5 or 6 incidents where these guys were. There was like 3 on 1 yard, so I kind of took a different stance with the Pruno stuff. It was like we started doing these when they'd go to the. This was on the main line when they'd walk to the chow hall. We'd roll in and we weren't searching cells. We were just looking for big bags of Pruno because you know how they used to do it with the big bags and then they'd heat it up. And so, and I don't even remember. I just remember going through there. I think we were writing them up then. But early on, I remember it wasn't a big deal. Just dump that stuff out. It's kind of that gray area
Right.
that Rudy talked about.
Yeah.
But when all those homicides started happening, we were writing them up. They wanted us writing them up. So it was things kind of changed a little bit. But um, the other thing I want to touch on too is these, like, especially for these guys that are new to corrections, is your best tool is to watch. And you just got to watch guys, who they're talking to, where they're going. I'll give you a great example. I remember walking on the yard. I was in my squad out, attire, and this guy walks by me, and it's a white boy, and he's drinking his drink, and it's a Sereno cup. So, little red flag went off. So I walked up to him. I said, "Hey, let me see your cup." And he's trying to drink. I said, "Give me your cup, man." "Oh, Peters." White lightning. They weren't drinking Pruno. They were doing white lightning on the yard. So I chucked it, and I didn't ever pulled that dude over because they always walked by. But why is a white guy got a Sereno cup,
Yeah.
And I knew he was a white because I know there's white Serenos. But that's one of those watching them. I'll give you kind of another example too. Is we had these Northerners. So the Northerners were notorious. If they had a guy on the yard that wasn't programming, they would send 2 good soldiers to get rid of one piece of crap.
Yeah.
And I remember this guy was walking the track, and I was on the squad at the time, and I used to go to the door. There was a breezeway door between, like, right next to medical and the program that went all the way through, and there was nothing in there. It was like a mechanic, but it went from the back side of the alleyway all the way you could get on the yard. Well, there was a window, so I'd go there a lot of times and watch the yards. Um, Try to be out of sight, out of mind type of thing.
Yeah.
And these guys hit this guy, man, on the back side of the track. And I mean, they thrilled this dude. And I could just never figure out why they would lose two good soldiers on a yard. You know, and then they always use those damn like tomahawks.
Right.
You know, I don't remember if they used the tomahawk on that guy, but I just remember seeing that. I mean, another one I responded to was in the gym, and this guy was a heavy, but they literally hit this guy on the bunk. It split his heart in half. That's how big the bone crusher was. Literally, when I went to the autopsy, his heart was literally all the way in half.
Wow.
There was blood on both sides, so it bled off the bunk down onto the floor. You know, and they had everybody outside. I don't remember if they had took the inmate. I'm sure they probably did. I can't remember. You know, they're always trying to save everybody, but there wasn't no saving this guy. And we found the weapon over by the trash can where they had the TVs, and there was like a little cutout back there where they had benches and then they had TV. Because, you know, I never saw a gym that ever functioned as a basketball gym. They were always housing inmates. You know, too high. Ours were always too high. I heard they went 3 high, but
Yeah.
that one was brutal. Another one I saw, same yard. Well, I didn't see it. I heard it. I was on the yard. I was on the phone down by the dining hall, and I heard this thud. And I was talking on the phone. I didn't think anything of it at the time. And I hear, get out, you know, and I turn around, and this guy's not 30 yards from me, laying face down, big old puddle of blood, killed him, you know, instantly. That whole investigation was really interesting too, because they used when those guys went to shoe, um, they didn't have enough evidence on them to book them, you know, and to get them well, they ended up using this guy that had just dropped out, and he'd be on one yard and those two were on the other, and they had a recording. I wasn't involved in it, but they had everything, man, to bust these guys on the recording. But what they used was that this guy's influence, because he was acting like he was still active as a Mexican mafia member, and he wasn't. But they didn't know that. So the court disallowed it because it was like under the, you know, of his influence type of thing that they talked.
Yeah.
So that was kind of strange.
Wow.
And I don't know but that was a brutal homicide too. God, there was a bunch over in the shoe too.
Man.
I remember one guy, it was a NLR hit. The NLR was notorious. I don't know if you guys had a bunch of them where you were at, but
Yeah.
God, we had a ton of them. And this one guy, they stabbed this guy just because his girlfriend had a black baby or something. It was something stupid.
Yeah.
I wish I could remember the guy's name, but so when I got called in, I went to the hospital. So this was at Corcoran, and I'm pretty sure it was at Corcoran. Yeah, it was at Corcoran. We actually had one of the DA investigators there, and the guy's laying there, and he had all these holes on his chest. I mean, like a target. And I was like, "There's no way that no defensive wounds on his hands or anything." And I remember telling my partner, I said, "I bet he's got some stab wounds in the back. He's got to." So we found out later that, And I actually got this guy. This was at the hospital, so I went to interview the guy after. But so when they flipped this guy over, he had 3 stab wounds in the back, and one of them was fatal.
Man.
Once they went to the autopsy, so he was dead before this guy plugged him. He plugged him like 20 times, right? And so anyway, this guy remained in the cell. I don't know how many counts went by because there was the guy finally told one of the cops, "Hey, get this guy out. He's stinking," or something. You know, it was one of those. He went through more than one count type of things. I never could understand that,
Yeah, yeah.
but it happened more than once. So
That's
stuff
nuts.
happens, and it wasn't my job to judge because I wasn't there when those guys were counting.
Right.
Anyway, my
That's
job
rough.
was just yeah, my job was just to go in, take the photos of the inmate, went to the cell. Well, this guy that stabbed this guy was down in the hallway. And if you're gonna interrogate someone, you got to Miranda them. But you don't have to Miranda them if you have no intention in interrogating them, right?
Right.
So I just went in there and looked at the dude and shook my head. Well, I had one of those digital recorders
Yeah.
in my pocket, and I had started it, and he made that ultimate mistake of mouthing off, like, "Yeah, I fucking did it. So what? What are you gonna do?"
Yeah.
And I said, I ain't gonna do nothing. I wasn't even gonna ask you anything, man. I just wanted to see who you were. And I can't remember the guy's name, but it's irrelevant. But yeah, I went back and told my boss, I go, "Listen to this," and he goes, "Did you interrogate?" I said, "No." I said, "I just looked at him and shook my head," and I said, "He just blurted it out." So I liked interview and interrogation. I went to a really good class. I went to a lot of good classes when I was in the department, but I think this guy's name was Scully or something. But he was really good at interviewing inmates, and he had a really high success rate and using his tools. And you got to have the gift of gab too. I mean, it's kind of like there's guys in the prison system that are book smart, but they don't got no street smart or common sense.
Right.
And I'm sure you've run across those guys. And I'm sure, with your military background, you were probably the type of guy that knew stuff like street smarts, common sense stuff.
Yep.
Um, but there was guys that were book smart that just were clueless, man. They had no clue. They couldn't look at a yard and see what was going on. Um, After I left the squad, I went into medical for a while, saw a bunch of stuff. I remember this Jewish kid hit the yard. He'd wear, I don't remember what they call those little things on your head, but he'd wear, and these
Yarmulke.
neo-Nazi guys. Yeah, yarmulke. So I don't remember if this guy, it was talk. I don't remember if these guys, I know they were Nazis. I don't know if they were, obviously if they were NLR, they'd have been validated. But, and I kept telling him, "Dude, why are you talking to those guys, man? They're not your friends,
Right.
because I knew this guy was going to get in trouble. And really wasn't my business, but, at that time I had probably, I don't know, 18, 19 years, and I'd seen quite a bit. And I kept watching them on the yard because I'd go outside and sit at the bench for a minute, because we had to do a lot of escorts
Yeah.
back and forth, go pick guys up. Um, or if the yard was running, they'd just come up. And I was out there, and sure enough, man, they stabbed the shit out of this guy. And I walked back into medical because I had, guys in there, and my partner was in there, and I'm like, we got one coming.
Yeah.
Or I said they're gonna. So they brought him over, and I remember him looking at me, and he says, "Fuck you, Peters, don't say a thing." And I was like, "I tried to tell you,"
Right.
you
Right.
know.
Right. No, I hear you. That's crazy, man. So we're gonna wind it down, man. We got an hour of good conversation going, dude. It was sounds like a whole different time frame back then, bro, in Corcoran.
Yeah, it was pretty
Um,
crazy back in the day.
I might have to have you for a round two, bro, to elaborate on certain more incidents and stuff like that, dude. I'm sure the
Oh yeah,
viewers want to
absolutely.
hear it. But
Yeah,
once again, man, thank you for coming on. Uh,
I appreciate it, man.
don't get off yet. Let me close out, and then I'll end it with you. So there you guys have
Absolutely.
it, folks. Another banger, man. Keep pushing forward.